My name is Alara Vance, and for 10 years, I lived and breathed architecture. I wasn't just sketching buildings, I was designing the future. For the last 3 years of my career at Thorne and Associates, that future had a name: the Aegis. The Aegis was supposed to be a skyscraper, yes, but it was more than that. It was my magnum opus, a mile-high, self-sustaining structure that utilized a revolutionary structural compound I had engineered and patented, which I called Vibrate. It was designed to absorb seismic and wind forces and convert them into energy, making the building impossibly stable and incredibly green. The project was my life. I sacrificed weekends, holidays, and maybe a few friendships for the Aegis. I poured every ounce of my genius into the digital models, the stress testing, and the thousands of lines of architectural code that governed its structural integrity. My boss, Marcus Thorne, was the firm's namesake and CEO. Marcus was the kind of man who measured success by his quarterly dividend and the size of his yacht. He understood money, but he didn't understand vision, and he certainly didn't understand the complex mathematics behind Vibrate. When the Aegis's final blueprint was ready, the moment I had been working toward for 1,100 days, I handed the complete digital model, including all proprietary source code and structural algorithms, directly to Marcus. I was proud. I expected a partnership, a promotion, maybe even my name on the building. What I got was a pink slip. The very next morning, my security pass was deactivated. When I marched into Marcus's office, he was relaxed, sipping expensive scotch at 10 a.m. "Ilara," he said, without even looking up, "I'm sorry, but we're moving in a different direction. Your role has been made redundant. Don't worry, your severance is generous." Redundant? Marcus, you have the final working model for a project worth $10 billion sitting on your desk, a project I created. He finally looked up, his eyes cold and devoid of remorse. "Technically, Ilara, we created it. You were compensated for your time, and frankly, the firm needs a fresh face, someone family." That's when I saw him, Julian Thorne, Marcus's son, who barely graduated from a mediocre architecture school and had been struggling in the retail design sector for years. He was sitting at a computer station that had been set up in Marcus's office, awkwardly fumbling with my complex Vibrate model. Julian looked at me with a smirk. "Oh, hey, Alara. Great work on the initial drafts. I'm taking it from here. Dad thinks I have the, vision to guide it into the 21st century." I was speechless. I wasn't just fired. I was replaced by a spoiled amateur who wouldn't be able to calculate the load-bearing capacity of a garden shed. Marcus had stolen my life's work, fired me to save money, and handed the victory lap to his incompetent son. I walked out that door a ghost. I didn't yell, I didn't plead, I didn't even pack my desk. I just walked out with a single burning thought. Revenge must be precise, delayed, and absolutely catastrophic. I spent the next 6 months watching them. They renamed the Aegis to the Julian Tower. Julian gave countless interviews claiming the idea for the self-sustaining design came to him, meditating on urban density. The city council, blinded by Marcus's political pull and the sheer grandeur of the model, approved the design. Construction was set to begin. They were moving forward, but they made 2 fatal mistakes. Mistake number 1. Julian, in a rush to claim the design as his own, ordered his team to scrub the digital model clean of my personal watermark and unique user identification embedded in the file metadata. Mistake number 2. They never truly understood the core function of Vibrate. During the 3 years I coded that structural model, I wasn't just optimizing for stability. I was building a safety net, a digital tripwire I called the Acoustic Integrity Switch, or AIS. It was dormant. It was a single, tiny subroutine, deeply nested in the Vibracore algorithm. Its purpose was simple. If the system detected that the original architect's unique digital signature was removed, it assumed the model had been illegally copied or altered. It wouldn't crash the program, that would be too simple. Instead, the AIS would subtly corrupt the harmonic frequency damping calculation. In layman's terms, skyscrapers vibrate slightly. Vibracore was supposed to use a counter frequency to cancel those vibrations out perfectly. The AIS, once activated by the removal of my digital signature, would introduce a minute, cumulative error into that counter frequency. For the first year, no one would notice. It would be less than a fraction of a millimeter of error. But once the building reached 50% of its planned height and the unique pressure of high-altitude winds began to hit the Vibracore structure, that tiny error would begin to resonate. The building wouldn't collapse immediately. It would simply start vibrating slightly, a low, rhythmic internal shudder that, over time, would destroy the integrity of the non-Vibracore materials, the glass, the sealant, the piping, the expensive interior marble. The building would literally vibrate itself apart from the inside out. And the best part? The system's diagnostics, still running on my original code, would register the problem as an unfixable, inherent material flaw, not a software bug. I waited. I opened my own tiny boutique firm, Vance Design. I took small, local jobs, slowly building capital. I was patient. Marcus and Julian were oblivious. 1 year into construction, the Julian Tower was a third of the way complete. It was already the most expensive building under construction in the state. Julian, predictably, was struggling. He had no grasp of logistics, the construction was delayed, over budget, and his project manager kept calling me, begging for consulting under the table. Ilara, I don't know why, but every time the wind hits 30 miles an hour, the internal telemetry starts showing these weird, low-frequency spikes. The structural integrity is fine, but the sound is unnerving. The engineers say it's normal resonance, but I don't believe them. I sounded sympathetic. The early resonance patterns, a common issue with tall structures. Don't worry, it usually works itself out once you pass the halfway mark. A lie. A perfect, comforting lie. 2 years in, the building was 70% complete. The concrete was poured, the glass panels were going up, and the project was now 3 times over budget. Marcus Thorne had sunk every dime of the firm's capital into the Julian Tower, believing it would make him a legend. The city announced the date for the final structural integrity test. This test was mandatory for every new skyscraper and involved a series of controlled, high-frequency vibrations designed to simulate a 9.0 earthquake. If the building passed, construction would continue. If it failed, the entire thing would be subject to a massive public safety review. The test was scheduled for the following Friday. I knew the moment had come. The constant, subtle resonance introduced by the AIS was already causing microscopic fractures. The final test would be the hammer blow. I didn't call the city. I didn't call the press. I called the one person that mattered, the head of the City Building Commission, a tough, no-nonsense engineer named Ms. Alcott. I sent her a simple, anonymous email. The subject line was Vibracore Anomaly, Julian Tower. The body of the email contained a single image, a highly complex, color-coded diagram of the Vibracore system's harmonic frequency damping calculations, with a tiny red circle pointing to the mathematically corrupted section of the code. I didn't say it will fail. I just wrote, look at the damping coefficient for the lower half of zone 5A during the mandatory test. Specifically, pay attention to the 1.5 Hertz sine wave response. If the reading is above 0.007, the structural integrity of the window seals and plumbing lines will fail within 18 months. It was a piece of information only the original designer could know. It was my anonymous smoking gun. Friday came. I drove to the site. I watched from the perimeter fence, indistinguishable from the crowd of other onlookers. Julian Thorne, looking sweaty and nervous in a pristine white hard hat, was giving an interview, standing next to his proud father, Marcus. The Julian Tower, Julian gushed, is a monument to innovative engineering. It will pass this test with flying colors. It is the safest building ever designed. The test began. The massive hydraulic shakers on the foundation started humming. You couldn't see the movement, but you could feel the ground trembling slightly. After 30 minutes, the test was stopped. Ms. Alcott and a team of engineers rushed out of the monitoring trailer, their faces grim. They huddled around Marcus and Julian. The conversation was intense. The rumors started immediately.
Something's wrong with the internal sensors, a glitch in the data. But I knew the truth. They had hit the AIS corrupted frequency, the 1.5 hertz sine wave. The building hadn't collapsed, but the internal vibrations were far outside the acceptable safety margin. The building was fundamentally unstable. Marcus, a master of spin, went straight to the microphone. "A minor calibration issue," he announced, forcing a smile. "Nothing structural. We'll rerun the test next week." But Ms. Alcott wasn't smiling. She stepped to the microphone next, holding a tablet. "Thorne and Associates, this commission is suspending all further construction on the Julian Tower, effective immediately. We have identified a severe, persistent anomaly in the structural damping system. The initial reports suggest the building's projected performance exceeds acceptable vibration levels by over 30%. She didn't need to say more. The crowd erupted. Journalists started shouting questions. Marcus shoved Julian aside and tried to grab the microphone back, his face turning the color of port wine. "This is outrageous! It's a conspiracy! We will sue!" But Ms. Alcott simply showed the tablet to the main construction monitor, which was also linked to the giant screen overlooking the site. The screen flashed the raw telemetry data. Zone 5A, damping coefficient 1.5, Hertz 0.009. It was my number, above the fatal 0.007 threshold. The next morning, the news was everywhere. The Julian Tower, a $5 billion shaker. Thorne and Associates scandal. The City Commission launched a full investigation. The one unassailable piece of evidence was the core structural code I had written, which still contained the active AIS. Their experts eventually concluded that the only way to fix the resonance issue would be to completely remove the compromised sections of the Vibracore, a fix that would require gutting the entire structure and starting over, an engineering nightmare that would cost billions and take a decade. Marcus Thorne was ruined. He had staked the entire firm on Julian's successful delivery, and now his company was facing lawsuits from investors, penalties from the city, and public humiliation. Julian Thorne became a public laughingstock, the architect who accidentally designed a giant tuning fork. I never revealed that I sent the anonymous email. I never claimed credit for the code's flaw. But 2 months later, I received a certified letter. It was from the City Building Commission. They were looking for a specialist to consult on the highly complex Vibracore structural issues of the defunct Julian Tower. They were seeking the original expert. My new small firm, Vance Design, was the only one qualified. I won the contract. The terms were simple. I would charge them 10 times my original salary. And my first condition, the building would be completely stripped down and rebuilt, not as the Julian Tower, but as the Ilara Tower, based on a new design I had developed since my firing, a design that would use the real, uncorrupted Vibracore. Marcus Thorne tried to sue me, but he couldn't. I hadn't broken any laws. I hadn't hacked anything. I had merely built a flaw into my own intellectual property, and he had been stupid enough to steal it without understanding it. On the day I signed the contract, I took a small detour. I drove past the offices of Thorne and Associates. The lights were dim. A small, sad sign on the door read, "Temporarily closed." I smiled. The Aegis was dead, but the Ilara Tower was about to rise, and this time it would be perfectly stable, built on the foundations of justice.